Okay, since I started recording again, so I'll just quickly recap what I said. Since Gabriel is facing issues with his internet, what I'm doing is I'm continuing in his place, and I will show you all how to install Laravel application in AWS. So first we will use this AWS service, which is called as EC2, which is Elastic Compute Cloud. EC2, what is EC2? EC2 is basically, it gives you a virtual server. If you have used any other shared hosting web server like HostGator or Bluehost or DreamHost, whatever, then you know what are servers. So we will go to EC2 dashboard and we will launch a new instance. In AWS terms, a server is called as an EC2 server is called as an EC2 instance. So we need to launch a new instance. The first step it asks is what operating system should the server use. So we are going to select Ubuntu 20.04 LTS. Now next, it will ask you for the size of the server. Since we are, this is just a demo, we will go with the smallest possible size, which is t2.micro. But if you're running a production server, which is, let's say, compute heavy or memory heavy, then you will definitely want to use a different size. So what does size means? Size will determine what will be the CPU speed and what will be the RAM on the server. So smaller size means definitely a lower clock speed, CPU speed, and lower amount of RAM available. So let's go to the next page. We will select t2.micro. We will move on. Next is it asks you for some configuration details for the server. How many number of instances we want, that is number of servers we want. So we will select one. We only want to create one server. What network we want. So when you create an account on AWS, it will automatically create a network for you. Network means internal network in which all your services will run. So this is VPC, means virtual private cloud. So this is the default network that AWS created for us. So we will use the same network. Whatever subnet, again, it selects something by default, we will use the same subnet. I'm not explaining in great details what all these things are. You can just go with the default value selected for now. Then we will let AWS assign any public IP, capacity reservation we want open. Then we will keep everything else as default. This is one important setting, shutdown behavior. This determines that when you shut down at a server, when you stop a server, what happens? So it can either stop or it can either terminate. Terminate means it will destroy the server. So what if we choose this, then what will happen whenever we stop the server? Instead of shutting it down, AWS will terminate it, destroy it completely. So we want the behavior to stop on shutdown, not terminate. We'll keep all other settings as is. And then we will go to next step, which is add storage. Storage means when the AWS server creates the instance, what size of disk we want to attach to the server. So let's go with, let's say, 16 GB for now. We want general purpose SSD hard disk, general purpose SSD to be attached to the server. Next is tag. You can add a tag. Let's say maybe tag is just to add some tags to the instances. If you have a big AWS account wherein you are running many instances, many servers, you can add some tags to the server to identify them. So I'm adding a tag called as name. Let's call this as Laravel test. Laravel Nagpur test. Next is configuring security group. So what is this security group? Now let's try to understand this first. Security group is sort of firewall which either opens or closes various ports on the server. So if you are running a web server, if you want to install the application on any server, what all ports do you normally want to open on the server? One is HTTP, that is port 80, so that it can serve the HTTP requests. The other port is HTTPS, port 443, so that it can serve the web over secure protocol, that is TLS HTTPS protocol. And then you also want SSH to be opened up so that you can actually connect to the server, log into the server, and run your commands. So by default, it shows SSH is opened. What we will do is we will add HTTP port 80. This should request from anywhere. This means anywhere. Request from anywhere. HTTP request from anywhere should be able to connect to the instance. Should be able to connect to the server. Similarly, we will configure HTTPS from anywhere. People should be able to send HTTP request to the server. Okay. Now let's review and launch. So we are creating an Ubuntu server. The size is t2.micro. It will have 1 CPU. It will have a memory of 1 GB. Why 1 CPU and 1 GB? Because we are using t2.micro. If you choose a higher instance, higher size instance, then there are more CPUs available and more memory available, RAM. And this is the security group that we configured. This means all these ports will be opened for incoming connections to the server. So HTTP, HTTPS, and SSH will be opened. And if you look at storage, then we are also attaching a hard disk, SSD to be specific, size 16 GB to the server. Let's launch. When you try to launch, it will ask you to create a new key pair. Now, what is this key pair? So once the server is created, what happens is you will need to SSH to the server, log into the server to install the application. Now, if you create a new key pair, this will put an SSH key on the server so that you can actually SSH without using any password. Okay. So let's create a new key. Let's call it Laravel test. This is a very important step. Without downloading this key file, you won't be able to SSH to the server at all. So let's download the key. This will download the key and we will save it. I've saved it in downloads folder. Actually, what I will do is, instead of creating a new key, I'll use an existing key. I have an existing key called as Ranium, so I will use that. Okay. Then I'll launch the instance. So now the new server is being created. Your instances are launching. In the meantime, what we will do is we will look at another AWS service called as RDS. RDS means Relational Database Service. So with this service, it also creates a new server and it runs MySQL database on that server. And this new server is configured to run MySQL databases in an optimum way. That is why we are using a separate service to run the database. We are not installing the database on the EC2 instance itself. We're not installing the database on the web server itself. EC2 will be our web server and RDS will be our database server. So let's create a database server. We will choose where is we'll choose MariaDB, which is MySQL compliant. Then let's name it, let's say Laravel Nagpur. This will be the name of the RDS server. Then it is asking for master username and master password. This is the root user that it will create in the database. So let it call admin is fine for now. Master password, let's put anything. I'll just put Laravel Nagpur for now. Okay. This is again selecting size for the database server. Again, similar concept. If you are large size means it will have more memory, more CPUs. For example, you can see db.m5 has 48 virtual CPUs and 192 gigabit of RAM. We don't need such a huge server, so we will go with the smallest possible size, which is db3.micro, which has 2 virtual CPUs and 1 gigabyte of RAM. Now for database server, again, we need to allocate some space. So we will allocate, let's say 100 GB disk space. And we'll go with general purpose SSD, allocate 20 GB is fine. We don't want auto scaling. If you enable auto scaling, then what happens is here we have selected 20 GB space for the database. If our database grows up to 20 GB, then AWS will automatically scale it. It will automatically add more space to the database server. So this is that setting, what it does. We don't need it for now for this demo. We will keep this as is. Connectivity, we'll use the same virtual private cloud that we used for EC2 instance. Whatever network we use for EC2 instance, we will use the same network for database as well, so that both of the web server can connect to the database server. Then subnet group, public access. We don't want public to access it. Subnet group, we'll choose default. VPC security group, choose existing VPC security group. For security group, we will choose the one that we created, which is whatever security group our instance is using. Let me see the name of the security group. So here, security launch wizard 1. So we will also use the same launch wizard 1. Here it shows you the costing, monthly costing as well. For the settings I chose here above, the disk space, the size of the RDS server and everything, it calculates the estimated monthly costs and shows it here. So currently with my settings, it will charge me around $30 per month. Once this is done, I will go ahead and create the database. And now database server is creating the database server. This takes some time. So in the meantime, let's go back to the EC2 server where we will run the web application. So you will see that our Laravel Nagpur test server is up and running. It is showing us running. Now let's SSH to this server and see whether it works or not. So I will select this server. I will then copy the public IP it assigned to the server so that I can SSH. I'll copy it and then I will SSH to that server. Since we chose the Ubuntu-based operating system, Ubuntu-based image, the default SSH username will be Ubuntu. So SSH Ubuntu @ server's IP, and then I have to specify the private key that I created when I launched the server. So it is this key. So here you go. I have successfully created the server and now I am logged into the server. This is the web server that we created inside EC2. Now let's start installing various softwares that we need to run a Laravel application. What all things do we need to run Laravel? Well, first we need the web server, which is Nginx. So before that, what I will do is, if by default, when you create a new EC2 server, and if you look at the RAM, this is 1 GB of memory approximately. It doesn't create any swap space. Now, what is swap? If you are someone who is coming from a Linux operating system, then you will know that Linux has this concept of swap, wherein the actual memory, actual RAM, if it gets filled, then it puts the applications in the swap. So since it is 0 bytes, what we will do is we will first create some swap space on this Linux operating system. So let me run few commands quickly to create swap space. So I'm creating a swap space of 4 GB at /swap file path. Then I will change the permissions to 600 so that only root user can read and write to this file. Then I'll run this Linux command, which will convert this file to a swap file, mkswap. So it shows this information that this file has now been converted to a swap file. And then I'll run this swap on command to instruct the operating system to treat this file as swap space. And now if I do free -h, you will see that apart from our 1 GB RAM, it is showing swap space of 4 GB because we created 4 GB swap file here. So now what will happen if we are installing softwares, if we are running some process which is taking more than 1 GB, it will automatically start using swap and not give us the memory exhausting error. Now let's install Nginx. So for that, we will first update apt. Apt is the package installer for Ubuntu. Apt has been installed. Then let's run an upgrade command quickly. We are running all these commands inside the EC2 server. This will take a minute. Please bear with me. So once apt has been upgraded, then we will install Nginx web server. Okay, now we will run the command to install Nginx. And then we will run command to install PHP. After Nginx, we need to install PHP. So we will be installing PHP 8. So for that, we will add this repository, which is called as onrich/php. And then we will run update once again. And then we will run upgrade once again so that the newly added repository upgrades the packages that were already installed. And then we will run command to install all the PHP packages. We are installing PHP 8. So these are all the dependencies required by Laravel. Okay, so now if you see, we should find PHP installed. If I do PHP -v, I can see PHP 8.0.10 installed. Okay. Now let's create a directory somewhere. Now first let's point the domain to the server. So for that you need to change your DNS. I'll quickly move the DNS window in here. Okay, no, not this one. Okay. So my DNS manager is Cloudflare. So from here, I'll be changing the DNS for laravelnagpur.com. I need to put the same IP, public IP that was assigned to my EC2 instance. So I'll copy this IP and then I will assign it here. This I am changing the DNS of the domain. So now laravelnagpur.com domain name will point to this IP, which is this EC2 instance. That is ultimately the request will come in to this server. So let's open a page and see if it works or not. Now if I put laravelnagpur.com, I should see something. Yes, it worked. So this is the default Nginx web page. How this came, because when we installed Nginx on the server, it creates a default landing page as well. So now let's install our Laravel application. We are done with installing all the dependencies. Now we just need to install the Laravel application. So for that, what I'll do is first I'll create a directory in where we host laravelnagpur.com. This is the directory where we'll keep our Laravel application. And then I will go to /vhosts. This is the directory where we'll be keeping our web application. This was created with root user. So let's change the owner. For changing the owner, the command is chown. I want to change the owner of the directory to Ubuntu. I need to do it with sudo. Now, if I look at the permissions, the directory is now owned by Ubuntu user. Now I can either clone my Laravel application in this directory, or if I'm starting a new project, then I can install the Laravel application through via Composer into this directory. So let's install Composer quickly as well, because we will need Composer. So this is the command field writing body. Why? Okay, because I am in a directory which didn't have permission for Ubuntu user to write. So now I'm inside the directory. I will get this file and then I'll run the Composer setup. Then now I should have the Composer command installed. So here you go. Next, what we will do is we will, using Composer, we will create a new Laravel project in the current directory. So a new fresh empty Laravel project will be installed inside this directory. In the meantime, let's open Laravel's documentation and copy the configuration that we will need for Nginx to point the domain to that directory. So if you go to Laravel documentation deployment section, here you will find the configuration that we need to put in the Nginx config file. So I'll just copy the configuration as is. Okay, then I'll go back here and I'll first, you will see the Composer create Laravel project is successful. Now I will see all the Laravel directories in this parent directory. Now we will configure Nginx to point the domain laravelnagpur.com to this directory. So let's go to Nginx directory, sites available. We need to create a new config file here. Let's call it Laravel. We'll paste the configuration that we copied from Laravel documentation. We need to change a few things. Server name. Server name is a domain that we will be using. So we are using laravelnagpur.com. So we will put that same server name, laravelnagpur.com. We want to point this domain to which directory? /var www vhost. Laravel application is inside where www vhost laravelnagpur.com/public. We'll keep everything else as is. And I think we should be, yeah, one thing. Since we are using PHP 8, we need to change this part to PHP 8.0. So we are using PHP 8 FPM. I'll quit the configuration. Then I need to go to sites enable directory and create a symbolic link from sites available to sites enabled. Sites available Laravel to dot. So now if you see in the sites enabled directory, no. What happened? Why is it not showing as symlink? Let me. Okay. Okay. It didn't create a symbolic link because I made a mistake. So let me remove the file first. sudo ln -s sites available. Laravel to current directory. So now we have copied over our made a symbolic link of the Laravel configuration file to sites enabled directory. Here you go. So now if we restart Nginx, it should pick up this site and it should then point laravelnagpur.com domain to our folder, to our web root. So let's restart Nginx sudo service Nginx restart. And now if I go to this page, this should show Laravel's default landing page. Okay, so it is showing some error because this file is not writable. So we need to make storage folder writable by the web server. So we will go back here. We will go to the web root, that is vhost laravelnagpur.com. And what we will do here is we will make this storage folder writable by web server. For that, we will make web server as the owner of this storage folder. So chown -rw data storage. Operation not permitted because I need to do it with sudo. So now storage server is owned by www data user, which is the Nginx user. So now the web server should be able to write to this storage folder. Let's see. Voila. So now our Laravel application is up and running on an EC2 instance. And if I now go back to RDS, our database should have been created. So our database is also available now. If I want to connect to this database from the Laravel application, then I will need the host name. So this endpoint is the host name. So I'll go back to Laravel application. I will edit the env file and DB connection. The host name is the endpoint shown for the RDS instance that was created. So this will be the host name. Database name, whatever database name we want to create. Username will be the username that we put in when we created the database, RDS database. So we had used what database username? We had used admin. Of course, this is the demo. That is why I'm using the admin root user as is. Otherwise, what you should normally do is once the database server is up and running, you should create another dedicated database user for your application with very limited permissions. And that database user should only be able to write and read from the application database and nowhere else. But for this demo purpose, to save some time, I'm just using the root user directly. And the password we used was Laravel Nagpur. So with this, we have configured our application to use RDS database as well. So I think that is it. I know I moved very fast. I'm not sure if you guys were able to understand what I was saying, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me now. Anyone, any questions?
This seems to be such a lengthy process, I can say. I just wanted to ask one thing. Today we were about to discuss the testing part, right? Didn't that happen?
Yes, Sangam. Actually, what happened is today's talk was to be delivered by Gabriel from Nigeria, but for some reason he was facing some internet issues and he dropped out in the middle and he wasn't able to connect back. So what I did is to fill in. I just chose this topic to present.
Okay, that's great. And do we still have time, or are we gonna wrap up now?
No, we are going to wrap up now.
Okay.
Unless someone has anything to say or present.
Yeah, definitely.
And yes, Sangam, so your concern was that this is such a lengthy process, and yes, it is a lengthy process. So the reason I showed this is uh, just to demonstrate and how all the tools can be installed on EC2 instance. Otherwise, nowadays, what happens is we get ready-made services available, like, for example, Laravel Forge. So in Laravel Forge, what you need to do is you just need to create an account in Laravel Forge and click one button, and it will create the server for you. It will install all the required dependencies, softwares, web server, everything for you. So most people choose that nowadays. But being a Laravel developer or being a PHP developer, one should know what all things goes behind the scenes if you're using a ready-made service. So that's what I showed.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, then if no one has, if there are no further questions, then let's wrap up. And once again, I'm sorry for today's fiasco. I think there was some issues with Gabriel's internet connection, and that's why he dropped out, and I had to fill in. And since I was not prepared for this, so I went very fast. And yes, we were last meetup. I said that we were going to the Pest PHP team. He was going to present a topic this month, but for some reason he was unavailable. So we have pushed that meetup to next month. So Luke Downing from the Pest PHP team, he will be presenting a topic on testing using Pest PHP in September's meetup now.
Just wanted to ask one thing since I have you Abbas right now is that like being a developer, what do you prefer? Do you prefer to write tests as you write code, or you do the testing and write test cases after you are done with your coding part?
Well, ideally, people do TDD, that is test-driven development. They first write tests and then they write code. But that following that methodology, it is really difficult. Really difficult to write tests, to think of everything upfront, write the test for that, and then start coding. So even though as much as we like to follow TDD, but in practical world, it is very difficult. And most of the time, what we do is we first write the code, we first implement the feature, and then we write the tests around it.
I spoke to this. Yeah, please complete.
Yeah, that's the sad truth about it.
I spoke about the same with one of the developers who's my friend. Actually, he's not a developer, he's a tester. But he said if you want to be a developer, you shouldn't be focusing on tests that much. Rather, you should be focusing on development. So being a beginner, or let's say as an intermediate level, if anyone could answer this, like, what should be my approach, or what exactly should we go ahead as an beginner or intermediate? Should we try our hands on with TDD, like test driven development, or should we focus more on our development part and like think as a testing is not our piece of cake or not our job to do, this is some tester that will do it? Any kind of suggestions are welcome, please.
Yeah, Sangam. So there are two kinds of testing actually. One is functional testing, wherein in large projects you see developers as well as QA engineers working on the same project. And these QA engineers, they are not developers at all. So they're responsible for functional testing. That is, they open a web browser. If we are talking about, let's say, any web application. So how will they test? They will open a web browser. They will do everything manually. So that is normally what is done in most of the projects. And in TDD, if you're talking about TDD, then TDD is solely developer's responsibility. There's no separate QA engineer involved in that, because for TDD, it is the developer who knows how to write tests in the code. A QA engineer will not be able to write tests at all. They will only be able to execute the tests. So for beginner, if someone is picking up web development, then I would suggest, of course, they can directly learn programming first. They can focus on that. They can keep TDD for later on. But if you're working on a large scale project and an enterprise project, or let's say any medium sized project as well, then TDD becomes very important. If not TDD, if not in true sense, but at least some kind of test so that you can make changes without worrying about breaking anything else. Was I able to answer your question?
Yeah, completely. I think I have my answer. At least for me, I do have my answer, what I need to do.
Yeah. So if someone is saying that testing is not developer's job, then they are partly true and partly wrong. Testing the code using code coverage and writing unit tests, that is definitely developer's job. And doing functional testing, manual testing, that is a separate QA engineer's job.
Yeah. And just one last question. I'm sorry if I'm taking it lengthier. Just wanted to ask, like recently there's a lot of noise about GitHub Copilot. So being a beginner, should I be afraid of it? Like, I mean, will there be a job in future for web developers, or this is going to collapse with the upcoming AIs and everything?
This is very difficult to answer, Sangam. And to be honest, I don't know the answer at all. It will just be my opinion. Even to make, if let's say the AI is coming into picture, then we need developers to run the AI program as well. So
but I think that's an entirely different domain, don't you think?
It is, but I don't think it is going to replace manual programming anytime sooner. The next 10-15 years, I don't think, it's my personal opinion, it's not possible to replace a human entirely.
Yeah.
At least in the next 10-15 years. So if you're talking about next a decade or two, then it's we shouldn't worry about it, and we should learn programming. Yeah.
Next decade we are safe as a developer.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abbas.
No problem, Sangam. Okay. I think let's wrap up. Thank you everyone who joined. See you next month. Bye-bye. Have a nice day. Nice evening.